Disasters continue to hit the headlines. Tsunamis drive huge waves through sea defences, destroying homes, industry, and worse. Storms flatten whole areas of cities. Disease epidemics break out and spread alarmingly. Losses from disasters continue to grow, driven by economic growth and climate change. These disasters hit the headlines. They mobilise massive emergency response. While we can't always anticipate them, we know a lot about them, how to prepare for them, respond to them, reduce their impact.
Nowhere is the impact of disasters felt more than in the world's major cities. Over half the world's population now live in towns, cities and huge sprawling megacities. If we want to understand disasters and how to deal with them, then where better to start than these concentrations of people, buildings, industry and disaster threats.
This is my native city. This is where I was born, and I've lived most of my life here. We had the opportunity to move up the hillside of Tegucigalpa. We now have a home here above the city, and it's like an oasis of peace after having lived door to door and wall to wall with my neighbors. The city has been growing towards the outskirts and towards the hillsides. It's been completely disorderly.
Behind the expanding formal economies of cities like Tegucigalpa are equally fast-growing shadow economies, black markets, what economists call informal economies. They represent a significant proportion of the life of cities. It's estimated that 40% of all economic activity in developing countries is hidden in this informal economy. It's made visible in the shanties of Mexico, Rio de Janeiro, Kampala, Johannesburg, Bombay, Dhaka, Manila and cities everywhere. It's beyond the reach of financial systems, city services and often even city laws.
These huge slum areas have taken over most of the potential problems that the city can have. So it's this complete disparity that you can see in our city, you know, very, very wealthy people. And then we have huge slum areas where people have not even the basics of water and electricity. When we went through Hurricane Mitch, the biggest shock for all of us was just how vulnerable we were. Our normal daily life is actually a situation of crisis. Whether it's natural because of heavy rains or heavy drought, or whether it's man-made because of violence and criminal activity, most people are living on the edge.
When a disaster like Hurricane Mitch strikes, it hits both the formal and the informal, the visible and the forgotten. The difference is that whether in Manila or New Orleans, it strikes the poorest, the people of the forgotten world hardest. Lacking access to proper city services, concentrated in areas hard to access and where building is chaotic and unregulated, they suffer greater losses with no social protection or insurance for the property and assets they lose.
Not only is this world forgotten, many of the disasters that strike it are forgotten too. Behind the visible headline disasters, at least 40% of all losses are actually the result of hidden, small-scale, regularly occurring disasters, everyday disasters.
When you have landslides, when you have traffic accidents, the government doesn't really care. The fact that someone loses a family member that is not announced on the radio, they don't attract a lot of attention, but they take tolls on the community, on the individual families. These are everyday risks.
Unlike the disasters that hit the headlines, forgotten everyday disasters are a complex and unpredictable mix of natural threats like floods and storms, combined with economic, political and social threats. Economic pressures lead to overcrowding and dangerous building. They push people onto unsafe, unstable or regularly flooded land. Political pressures impact people's lives through inequality, poverty, corruption and even conflict. Social pressures push people's fragile livelihoods towards crime, addiction, violence and social breakdown. Albertina Velázquez lives in Nueva Chiapa, a community of over 30,000 people on the edge of Tegucigalpa, who settled on this former garbage tip after they were displaced by Hurricane Fifi. She's seen the settlement develop and struggled to raise her children to avoid them being sucked into the gang culture, which substitutes for the lack of education and employment in this informal settlement.
La delincuencia preocupa mucho. La verdad que aquí vivimos muy inseguros. Yo tengo miedo por mis hijos. En las residenciales hay barrios seguros, pero aquí nosotros no tenemos seguridad de nada. Otras cosas que pasan en nuestra comunidad es como el alcantarillado. Nosotros no tenemos alcantarillado. Aquí nosotros sufrimos por eso, ¿verdad? Porque nosotros necesitamos tener alcantarillado, necesitamos tener agua potable seguido.
People like Albertina, with their communities, face everyday disasters. They are everyday heroes, often left to their own ideas and resources with little support from beyond their own communities. Disaster management systems in cities and nations, and the international frameworks which shape them, focus on large-scale disasters resulting from natural threats. But the everyday disasters, which continually impact the lives and livelihoods of their populations, continue to grow, affecting 40% of urban populations, and with at least 40% of losses resulting from these everyday disasters, it's vital to reveal these forgotten disasters and learn how to tackle them.